It's been over a decade since I first picked up the cube and started solving it. My journey is still far from over, and I still have so much room for improvement. But hopefully I'm getting there. Today, I'm here to tell you how I got this hobby and what better ways to start than the actual beginning. As a kid, I've always been fascinated by many things like how wheels move, are rainbows real, why fire emits light, and why girls have boobies, and other mind-boggling mysteries that a normal kid would think of. So, while the realities of this realm are being unfolded right before my eyes, I've seen this interesting puzzle that has beautiful colors and an interesting mechanism that you'd need to rotate a certain side to move the blocks around. Because of the curious child that I was, this feeling of void needs to be filled. And so, with that in mind, I've begun this grand conquest of acquiring the knowledge needed about this puzzle. I asked the people around me, and thankfully, even they were aware of this puzzle, that this is the Rubik's Cube. I was a 3rd grade at the time, and a few weeks after I found out about it, our math teacher, who we'll call the adjudicator, decided for our project that we need to solve the cube if we were to pass the subject. I was very excited. It's like the stars are aligning for me. After class was over and I went home, I asked my parents to buy me a cube, and they were very supportive of this new thing that I was interested at. I remember my first cube not being the puzzle that a fast cuber would use, but that's fine since I'm still learning it. I messed with it for about an hour or two, but that's when the realization came that learning the puzzle isn't as smooth sailing as I thought it'd be. By the time, I was still not aware that there were tutorials at the internet since it's not as mainstream as it is today. So, all I could do was one side at a time, and it made me extremely happy to be able to have a skill that I've worked for. After a few days, everyone at class brought their own cube, and we spent the entire math session for learning the puzzle. This is where I knew that I needed someone to teach me the cube somehow. So, I looked around the room, and that's where I found one of my classmates who was already quite skilled with it, although I wasn't sure if she already knew how to solve the whole thing. So I asked her. We'll call her Senpai. She was very kind to teach me while she's still learning. This is where I learned that after you finish building your base, you need to next build the whole layer below it, and make the colors align, which is also known as the first layer. Also keep in mind that I didn't start learning the standard way until much later. Learning the first layer was quite easy as it didn't affect much of the cube and it's quite early in the process. So, I remember getting the hang of it way before the time was up. After practicing, a friend of mine asked us to race each other. It felt very much like an actual battle, as I feel the adrenaline rush through me. After a few rounds, I noticed that I can't win. It didn't quite hit me as hard, but it's still frustrating. Then, the following day, it's time to learn the second layer. I'm still as motivated as ever, and the fact that I find it even simpler than the first one gave me the boost that I needed. Although, it's the actual first time that I needed to learn an algorithm. Once you memorize the pattern and practice enough times, you will get the hang of it. So, within the same training arc, I was ready for the 3rd layer. At first, Senpai mentioned that I needed to do the cross that's directly opposite of my base before the actual last layer. For the beginner method, there were about 4 cases that might occur when building the cross. First is after completing the 2nd layer, the cross is already finished and you're lucky. The second one is the bar, where one of the edges is on either side forming a small L. The third one is like a big L where 2 adjacent edges are formed, and the last case is where there is no edge at all, and there is a dot in the middle. The first case is a given, but for the second and third one, they need their own algorithm, and as for the last one, you need to perform both the second and third algorithm. Memorizing this part requires more brain cells than I actually have, and there's smaller room for error. I struggled for a while and decided to do my own tournament training arc. It took me 2 to 3 days of blood. Just blood. Before I was ready to heed to my calling. It felt like I'm about to face the boss on the floor. For the next part, There's two cases on this phase, which luckily requires only one key. By one key, I mean algorithm. Only the positions change for this one. After this part was over, you just need to find the corners with the correct sides even though its colors don't orient the right way, and perform an algorithm a certain number of times until all corners are in the right places. Then, after the sides are complete, you just need to perform the last algorithm that'll look like you're disassembling everything you've solved, but don't worry, be happy. This move is the special technique that allows you to finish the boss with finesse. After exhibition, you'll need to align it properly and bada bing bada boom. Finally, I have acquired the skill which is followed by a rush of adrenaline through my veins. I had a good mentor. After a few minutes during class, I challenged my own senpai in a battle to the death and see who's the far more superior being. Nah, just kidding. I just wanted to test my skills, and while we were racing, I noticed that I was quite faster, and not long after, I whooped the floor and it made me feel a more superior being. Soon after completing my tournament arc, a few days of rest, and I was ready for the day of reckoning. The adjudicator called me like we were marching to war, and boy, was I ready. While we were soaked in battle, I realized adjudicator was recording and measuring each of our strengths. Then, after the whole tournament arc was over, the adjudicator revealed the reason she had us obtain the skill. It's basically another tournament arc, and what do you expect? It made me even more excited that I was ready to soar the skies and see my full potential. Will I be able to win my first tournament? Or not? But that's a story for another time.